Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Mohammad Sohail Khan. In this particular session, I will be talking about human resource planning and job analysis. So let's see that how human resource planning basically fits into the whole of human resource function. Human resource planning is basically considered as a first human resource functions that is needed in terms of getting organizational goals. So most of the organizational text talks about human resource management. Then they move to strategic management, human resource management, where they talks about the alignment of human resource management functions with the corporate strategy or firm's organizational strategy. After that, the first function or the first chapter that you will be encounter will be about human resource planning and the job analysis. So let's see that how human resource planning is defined. So human resource planning is a process by which an organization ensures that it has the right number of people at the right place at the right time. So human resource planning is basically planning about the human resources in terms of the type of people that will be needed in terms of working on organizational tasks, and it tries to ensure that employees or the human resources that are a part of organization has the necessary or capability in terms of effectively and efficiently completing the organizational task, because those tasks will somehow relate to the organizational strategic objectives. So human resource planning basically ensures that organization has has the right amount of people, right kind of people at the right place at the right time that basically needs in terms of getting organizational strategic objectives. In terms of planning, human resource planning basically linked to organizational overall strategy, whether it's domestically, locally, or the global strategy. So basically, human resource planning translated into the types or the number or the types of worker that is needed for the organizational objectives. So in terms of doing human resource planning, human resource managers needs to set up with top managements so that they needs to plan all the HRM objectives or issues. So human resource planning basically talks about what kind of people I need in my organization, what type of people I need in my organizations, depends on the strategical objectives that my organizations has basically chalked out. Looking at the organizational framework in which human resource planning basically fits in. So if we just talk about organizational strategy, so organizational strategy basically talks about the mission of organization. So mission of organization or organizational mission statements basically talks about what business that organization is in. So what is the purpose of its existence, why that particular organization exists. The mission also talks about who that organization is basically serving. So what kind of customer that organization is basically serving. So who is its customer? Who are that organization customers? So human resource statement of the organization. So mission statements basically talks about the purpose of organization, the existence of the organization, the customer of the organization. So mission statements talks about why this organization is existed. So what businesses they are doing, what is the purpose of their existence, who are the customer that they are serving. So this is what the mission statements talks about. Vision statements basically talks about the declaration of organizational objectives. So what this organization is here to achieve, what are the salient features of that organizations, what are the objective goals of those organizations that this organization will strive to achieve. From the vision statements we will trickle down towards the strategic goals. So strategic goals basically talks about what are the goals, or how those goals or how those objectives should be fulfilled. Strategic goals are somehow the statements that establish target that organization will need to achieve. So statements or the targets that organization needs to be achieved. Most of the strategic goals are set up by senior management. It will be beneficial if those goals will be collaboratively established with the employees itself. So strategic goals are set by senior management in terms of establishing the targets, so what organization needs to achieve. Then there is a whole philosophy of SMART goals. SMART goals basically talks about the goals that has established target, that has established vision, that has a established criteria in terms of achieving it. So once we are talking about SMART goals, we are talking about specific goals, we're talking about measurable goals, we're talking about attainable goals, we're talking about reliable goals, and also we are talking about the goals that are timely bound. So strategic objectives or strategic goals should be the one that are realistic, that needs to be attainable, that needs to be timely bound, and that are specific goals. In terms of organizational literature, SMART goals or the strategic goals needs to be along 5 to 20 years. So depends on what kind of goals that we are talking about. However, strategic goals should be defined for the next 5 to 20 years. And definitely it depends. Are we talking about the short-term goals? So it would be like 5 years of goals, or we are talking about the long-term goals that would be last towards till 20 years. Now the question is that how organization knows that what kind of human resources that we need in terms of achieving the organizational mission. So there's a framework that we call SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis basically used in terms of giving a true picture of organization, that what kind of strength, weaknesses, opportunities or threat that this organization has, and how they can really succeed into the market. So SWOT analysis determines what is needed to meet organizational objectives. So what is needed in terms of meeting that organizational objective. Or we can say that SWOT analysis will basically create a link between organizational goals and the company, that how that company basically meet that objective. So it's a link, it will provide a link between the objectives and how it needs to be attained. So in SWOT analysis, we'll talk about organizational strengths. So what are the best attributes that this organization has? What are their core competencies? What are their competencies on which they can really compete in the marketplace? What are their core strengths? So strengths are basically their core competencies on which organization strategy is basically founded, on which organizations really needs to compete into the marketplace. The second is weakness. Weakness is basically the resources that organization lacks. So the gray areas or the black areas or the weak areas of that organization, or the some areas or the skills or the attitudes or the area where organizations are not really performing well, or that the organization are basically performing poorly. So weaknesses are also important in terms of gaining the true picture of that organization. Then we talked about the opportunities. Opportunities are the areas where organization can gain organizational competitive advantage. So what are the strengths that we have, and on the basis of those strengths, what are the opportunities that the organization can gain? Strength are somehow related with the opportunities of the organization. Threats are basically the black area or the weaker areas or the threats that basically that organization is feeling or having or perceiving from the environment. So those threats would be from the environment. Those threats can be a result of the weakness. Those threats can be a result of a strategy that basically organization needs to be rethink, or those threats can be also from the competitor's point of view. So if your competitor is strong in some areas, basically that organization or your own organization is feeling or perceiving threats on those areas. So threats are really is also really important in terms of having a true picture of that particular organization. Again, SWOT analysis will create a link between organizational goals and how our company or our organization will basically achieve those objectives. We talked about that SWOT analysis will create a link between organizational goals and how company can achieve or meet those objectives. Now we'll talk about the job analysis itself. So how HRM functions needs to know about the human resource planning. So HRM determines what knowledge, skills, abilities are needed by the organization's human resource through the job analysis procedure. So job analysis procedure basically tells you what kind of expertise, what kind of skills, what kind of abilities that organization will be needing in future. So job analysis somehow linking organizational strategy to the human resource planning. However, how it basically moves from the organizational missions to the typical job analysis procedure. We will see that how HR basically links with the strategic directions of organization. So how basically the linkage is created in terms of human resource planning and job analysis. So for example, if we just looked at the strategic directions of an organization. So for example, organization will first create the mission statement. So mission statement talks about that what is the purpose of that organizational existence, why this organization is basically existing. Once we know the direction or once we know the purpose of the existence of organizations, we'll track down or will trickle down towards the vision statement of the organization. Vision statements talks about what are the objectives that basically organization needs to attain. It is basically the declaration of the objectives. After the declaration of the vision statement, we'll move towards the strategic goals and objectives. So strategic goals and objectives basically talks about how we will be achieving all those objectives. So what are the criteria that we will be looking in terms of achieving all those objectives? Once we have clarity in terms of how we will be achieving those objectives, so for example, what are the target areas that we will be looking at in terms of achieving those objectives? What are the strategical objectives? What are the target areas? What are the performance objectives? What are the major goals? What are the strategy goals? What are the SMART goals that these organizations needs to be achieved? Once we have all those criteria set in, then organization basically moves towards the strategical objective, that how in terms of operation strategy, in terms of how organization will be achieving those objectives, determine how to or attain those goals and objectives which we have set in the strategical or the objective and goals stage. Those operational strategy will basically talks about the day-to-day task, how those goals or objectives needs to be gained, needs to be achieved. So in the strategical phase, we are talking about the operation strategy of the organization. Then we'll trickle down or we'll move toward the structure of the organization. In terms of structure, we're talking about the hierarchical structure of the organization, how the jobs will be defined, how the jobs will be determined, how the organizational structures needs to be filled in, whether the organizational structure will be a matrix structure, whether the organizational structure will be based on the functional areas of the organization. So for example, whether we will be talking about the human resources, we are talking about the finances, we are talking about the strategical objectives, we are talking about the marketing functions, how basically we are planning the jobs to be created. And the last but not the least, we're talking about the most important aspect of an organization, and that is people, that is employee. How basically that organization needs the employees, what kind of skills they are needed, what kinds of knowledge they need, what kinds of abilities are needed. And how do we know this? Because once we do the job analysis that these are the jobs that we are needed, these are the organizational structures that these jobs will really fill in, then there's a whole debate about what kind of skills that we need in terms of achieving those jobs objectives, in terms of fulfilling those jobs, in terms of completing those jobs. So the last function of that strategic direction of HR planning talks about the main or the salient function, that is people, in which the skills have been matched towards the jobs, the knowledge has been matched towards the jobs, the abilities needs to be matched towards the job that that organization needs to be fulfilling. I hope that this session gives you better understanding of human resource planning. Thank you very much.